Hi everyone, and welcome to this how to play of Cirque. I've got my copy of Cirque in front of me right now. This is a sample copy from the factory, so there are a few things that I will highlight throughout the video that will be a little bit different in the final version from the one you see today. But this is my, for the time being, how to play of Cirque. I'm going to go through the components, I'm going to go through setup, and I'm going to go through gameplay, including some of the asymmetrical elements, and like I said, some of the things that may be different just from a component standpoint between what the copy I've got today and the copy that I'll have in a couple of weeks when the second official sample comes through from the factory. Cirque is a game for 1 to 4 players where you build a circus. You hire your performers, you conduct performances, and you compete against the other players building their circuses as well. I consider it to be a friendly competitive experience whereby most of the activity of the game is going to be you kind of working on your circus, but there are significant spaces of interaction, and it definitely feels like a game that you actively play with others. There are goals that you're all competing for. There are different things to score against each other at the end of the game, and then there are in-game interactions as well. So let's move on to the components. First are the player boards. There are 4 of them, 1 for each player, and they come with an accent color that matches the player color. These boards are where players will lay their performers, conduct their performances, and overall build their circus. Everything that happens in those circuses is driven by performers, and those performers are represented by 180 individual unique performer cards. Every single one of these is different. They all have different values, different costs, and different abilities. I've also included in the game 16 tutorial mode cards. These do not get mixed in with the regular cards. For first-time players or for players who are relearning the game, these cards represent a set of scripted moves that get you started and that kind of heat your circus up so that it speeds the game along that first time just a little bit. Also included are 11 solo mode cards. There are 9 base cards and 2 difficulty cards that increase the difficulty of solo mode. These also do not get mixed with the main deck. They are for players who are dedicated playing a solo mode. This represents the bot, as it were, that you're playing against in solo mode. And finally, when it comes to cards, there are ringleader cards. Each of them is different. There are 10 of them, and players will play as one of these ringleaders as part of the base experience of the game. These are designed to encourage different play styles, to allow players to have different abilities, and generally it alters the way you play to introduce that asymmetrical element of gameplay. Included with the ringleader cards are various ringleader tokens. I will elaborate on the functions of these tokens when I get into ringleaders in a little bit. Also included in the base game are 5 animal mini figurines. An elephant, which is the turn marker that you pass around, so that people know whose turn it is. And then 4 of these smaller figurines that represent the player turn markers. Each of these will be colorized according to the player color in the accent color on the player boards, and the sizes will be regularized. The model that I sent the factory had some errors, and that's why you do this sampling, so you can find stuff like that. So all of that has been fixed. All of the models have been improved visually, and at some point in the near future, I'll do an unboxing with the new models. Other minor markers include a rest turn marker. This is my homemade version. When I sent this out for sample, the wood components were not quite ready, and so I also have 10 cubes in each player color, so 40 total 8mm wooden cubes, each in, as I said, player color, and this is like a nice purple color. This is the rest turn marker, and then this is the final die that will go in the game, so a D12 mostly for games of chance. There are also a series of 6 punch boards. I've already punched everything out, so let me show you what I punched out. The main game board is not quite a game board. It's a modular tile action system. So these can be arranged if you have a strange or a small table, these can be distributed throughout the table however you want. But there are 3 larger hex size actions. The biggest one is the performance action, and then the second biggest one is the Talent Scout action. I'll go through the actions later in the video, but there are 5 actions, and like I said, you can assemble them as a main board, or you can distribute them throughout the table so that everybody can reach them, whatever works best for the play space that you have. One final note about the modular tiles. This artwork that you're seeing here is not the final artwork. This was a stand-in from when it was one major board before we made it modular. And so the tabletop simulator clips that you're going to see throughout this video show you the final artwork and what it kind of really looks like now. Tabletop Simulator demo, by the way, is free to play. You can find a link to that on our Gamefound page or on our website. There's also the reward board. I'll get into the reward board later in the video, but suffice it to say you've got one of these, and then in the final version, the solo mode will be on the back. Along with the reward board, of course, come the rewards. There are 18 double-sided feat tokens and 12 double-sided renown tokens. These make up some of the goals that players are going to compete against each other to earn points for. Alongside the feat and renown tokens are the spec tokens. Again, I'll explain these in a minute. These enhance performances and allow people to build very deliberate engines to help them achieve whatever goal they're going for. In terms of resources, these are my own bowls, of course. We've got money, 5, 10s, and 1s. There's plenty of money. We've never run out before. We've got peanuts. Peanuts are an interesting resource that have a variety of functions. And we've got popcorn. There's a lot of popcorn in this game. The opportunity to earn a lot of popcorn represents both a scoring opportunity and a source of utility throughout the game. Again, these will be explained in a little bit. There will also be 4 quick reference guides, both sides, that explain abilities, renown, rest periods, and some of the other stuff we're going to be talking about in this video. And finally, we have the rule book itself. It's a hefty rule book because I have opted, instead of having like one rule book and one glossary and one this and one that, I've put everything centrally into this one rule book with the glossary and the iconography on the back. So all the rules are in there. Let's move on to game setup. You've got basically 2 phases, the player setup and the game setup. For the game setup, you'll want to distribute your modular action tiles throughout the table in an area where everyone can reach them. Place the rest marker on the bottommost platform icon on the rest track. Shuffle the spec tiles and place them on either the silver or the gold side according to the icons on the board. For a 2-player game, you'll only fill the bottom 2 silver and the bottom 2 gold. For a 3-player game, indicated by the 3 balloons icon, place the extra 3rd silver side. And for a 4-player game, you'll place all 6, 3 silver, 3 gold. There are 10 ringleader tokens. Place them face down, shuffle them, distribute 2 to each player. Those players then flip them and choose 1 ringleader to play. Of course, if players have preferences of ringleaders they'd like to play, it's perfectly fine to just choose the one you want. If you have chosen the supervisor ringleader, collect the 8 purple supervisor tokens and also place them next to your ringleader with the ability icons face up. If you have selected the architect ringleader, place the 5 green architect tokens next to your ringleader with the beige font facing up. Choose a player color and collect the appropriate player board, animal miniature, and 10 wooden cubes. Place 1 cube on the level 1 reputation ticket icon on your player board, and place a 2nd cube on the first spot on your approval track. Deal 6 performer cards to each player. Place 3 performer cards face up in the hiring office, and then players will choose 4 cards to start with and discard the other 2. Players may also choose to utilize a drafting method, choosing 1 card, passing the rest, and going around and around until all cards have been selected, and then discarding 2 cards. Finally, each player starts with 6 coins. Place the reward board nearby on the table, somewhere within reach. Randomly place 6 feat tokens on the feat token slots, 3 of them on the gold side, and 3 of them on the silver side. Also place 4 renown tokens on the 4 renown spots on random sides. Players will compete for these 10 objectives throughout the game. There are 5 actions you can take in Cirque. First is the Circus Manager action. The Circus Manager action is the only way to hire and retire performers in your circus. This action consists of 2 steps. The first is to hire, and the second is to retire. Whenever you see the icon of the scales next to an ability icon, that always means the ability is optional. If you do not see a scales symbol as you're activating an ability, that is always mandatory. In this case, the Circus Manager is telling you you have the option of first hiring a performer. To hire a performer card, I simply take it from my hand, place it into the lowest available act slot in my big top, and pay the coin cost at the top right of the card. In this case, I'll play the trampoline into the number 1 slot in my big top, paying 4 coins to do so. Now, just because I hired the trampoline does not mean that I activate the ability you see here. That will be activated during the performance action. Now, if I hire the animal act, on the other hand, These abilities have on hire and on retire yellow ability types. Those are activated when you hire them or when you retire them and never again. Retiring a performer is as simple as taking a card from your big top and moving it somewhere into your sideshow. The only two requirements are that A, it has to be able to live in the sideshow. Clowns are the only cards that are not allowed to live in the sideshow. And B, it can't be the card you just hired. Otherwise, to recap, you have the option of hiring a card into your big top, and then you have the option of retiring a card into your sideshow. You are not required to do both of those actions, but if you do both, they must happen in that order. Now let's say, on the other hand, I wanted to hire the Wunderkammer, the Cabinet of Curiosities. One of the reasons I was able to hire the trampoline is that it has a reputation level of 1, as indicated by the ticket icon on the top left of the card. All players' circuses start out with a reputation level of 1, so as long as you can pay for it, all players can play level 1 cards from the very beginning of the game. In order to play a level 2 card and then a 3 and 4, 5 all the way up to 8 and 9, there are a couple of options that players have. The first option is to take the Barker action. By default, when players take the Barker action, they increase their approval track by 4 slots. The approval track is the spinner in the center of your big top. Every time your cube travels all the way around that spinner back to the starting space, you increase the reputation of your circus by 1. When I increase my circus from level 1 to level 2, I also gather a popcorn. If your circus's reputation is already at level 8, each time you loop around, you will gain the 4 popcorn indicated on that symbol. So engines that have a lot of approval gain can end up earning a lot of popcorn for a player. There are card abilities that can cause you to lose approval, but that cube can never go backwards past that starting space. So think of it like a ratchet. Once you click into that next loop, you are prevented from losing any approval beyond that first starting space. This may be the primary but not the only way you can improve the reputation of your circus. As soon as your circus reaches level 2, you're able to play the Wunderkammer by taking the circus manager action, paying your 6 coins, and laying it down in the lowest act slot into your big top, which next to the trampolinist would of course be act number 2. I would of course then have the option of retiring the trampoline if I wanted to. I think in this case I'll stop. So in this event, I would have to take the Barker action twice to get all 8 spaces around and increase my circus's reputation. There is, however, another option for playing cards that exceed your circus's reputation level, and that is the signing bonus. The signing bonus allows players to gather 3 peanuts and then choose 2 of the indicated resources. If we take another look over at the Circus Manager action, you'll notice that we're allowed to discard 3 peanuts to reduce the hiring reputation requirement of a given card. So if my circus reputation level was still 1, but I wanted to play the Wunderkammer into my big top, all I would have to do is take the signing bonus action on one turn, gather 3 peanuts, and then on my next turn I would take the Circus Manager action, discard these 3 peanuts to reduce the requirement of the Wunderkammer by 1 level, pay my 6 coins, and place it into my big top like normal. Players by default are allowed to hold up to 6 peanuts at once, which means that you can reduce the level of these cards by up to 2 levels at one time. There can be card abilities or ringleader abilities that increase the maximum number of peanuts you can hold, which would then increase the number of levels you could reduce, but by default it's 6 peanuts, 2 levels. At this point, you've done a lot of administrative work for your circus, but you haven't actually put on a show, and you're running out of money, and so the performance action fills that gap. The performance action is in general the most complicated action in Cirque, and it consists of 4 steps. The first step is you'll always increase the rest marker by 1 level. The second step, very simply, you gather 3 money. You always get money for carrying on a performance. The third step in the performance action is to activate your big top abilities. I haven't yet covered all the ability types, but suffice it to say for now, you're only looking at the red ticket abilities that have the red tent icon on them. To activate these abilities, you go in act order 1 through 6. So first I activate my trampoline, I gain 2 approval and 2 money. This card's also going to force me to do something at the end of my turn. Then I move on to the Wunderkammer and I lose 3 approval. But also if my reputation level is less than 3, I'll gain 3 peanuts. This is an instance in which I may have played these cards in the wrong order. The approval that I gain when I activate the trampoline is then lost with the Wunderkammer. But it's still early game, my reputation level is under 3, and so maybe I'm happy just gaining the benefit of those 3 peanuts. So this is an instance in which you can see building a really effective engine in your big top is very important even from the very beginning of the game. With only these 2 cards in my engine, Now, not only am I getting 3 money from performance, I get 2 more from the trampoline, and then I get 3 peanuts, which displaces perhaps the need to take the signing bonus action. Building a very effective engine here makes all of your turns more efficient. However, you will only activate the red abilities in your big top until you reach a red X symbol. This means 2 things. Number 1, if you pass over an ability that's not a red ability, nothing happens, but you still keep going. So for example, I've got my trampoline, I do the thing. I've got my Wunderkammer, I do the thing. I also have my clown here, the animal act. That does nothing, but I keep going. I activate my bareback riding, 4th, I do the thing, but then I reach a red X. And at that point, the big top portion of my performance action ends, and I move on to the sideshow portion. I do not activate the chariot race. This forces players to think carefully about when they hire and when they retire something, leaving gaps in their circus, thus leaving gaps in their engine. Now you'll notice that every card has a top ability and a bottom ability. The top ability is only active when that card lives in the big top. The bottom ability is only active when that card lives in the sideshow. You'll also notice that the victory point value, represented by this little star, is different depending on whether the card lives in the big top or the sideshow at the end of the game. So this trampoline card, for example, might be a little bit annoying because it keeps swapping itself and changing the order of things in my big top, but as soon as I move it over to the sideshow, it loses 7 points worth of value. Cirque is full of all kinds of those little trade-offs. There are always trade-offs between utility and point value at the end of the game. The spec system, which is short for spectacle in history, is the final component of the performance action. When you take a performance action, either at the beginning of the 3rd phase, the big top activation phase, or at the end of it, you have the ability to purchase one of these spec tiles and activate any spec tiles you have already purchased. The silver spec tiles cost 2 peanuts, the gold spec tiles cost 4 peanuts. You may only ever purchase 1 on your turn. So for example, after increasing the rest marker, after gathering my 3 coins, if I then wanted to spend 4 peanuts to take this spec tile and place it here on my player board, I would then gather 3 money on my turn every turn I took a performance. Now there may be some abilities in your big top that gain you peanuts. In that case, you may choose to activate the spec at the end of the 3rd phase of your performance action, but it can only be activated either at the beginning or at the end, not half and half. The 4th step in the performance action is to activate the blue ticket abilities or the sideshow abilities. Those will only ever occur in your sideshow, and unlike the big top, you may activate them in any order you please. You will activate these every time you take the performance action. So for example, I've got the roulette card down here in my sideshow. The roulette is a game of chance card, and there are a whole bunch of them throughout the game. Observant viewers will notice 2 things. The first is that the bottom ability, which is the active ability in this case, of the roulette, has 2 different ability colors. Let's just concern ourselves with the blue one for now, but just note that cards can have 2 different colored abilities on one spot. The blue ability is what we're activating in the second part of our performance action, and so we do the thing. Guess a number, roll the die, we win or lose. Observant viewers will also notice the void symbol in the top ticket slot. This indicates that the roulette card can only ever live in the sideshow, and in fact, when you take the Circus Manager action, you should hire that card directly into the sideshow rather than into your big top. On the other hand, we have clowns in the game. Clowns always can only live in the big top, which means you will hire them into the big top like normal, but you will never ever be able to retire them into the sideshow. They stay in your big top until the end of the game. This also means that it's theoretically possible to fill your entire big top with clowns and lock yourself out of playing the rest of the game. I would advise not doing that. Once you have activated all of your blue sideshow abilities, your performance turn is over. However, you'll notice on the rest track there are a series of spaces that have different numbers of balloons on them. Just like with the spec tiles, those balloons indicate player number. If in your performance action you have increased the turn marker to a space that represents the number of players in this game, you have triggered what's known as a rest period. We'll get to rest periods in a moment, but the most important thing I want to highlight here is you are going to complete your performance all the way before moving into the rest phase. But first, we have one more action to cover, and that is the Talent Scout. The Talent Scout is very simple. You draw 2 cards. either from the hiring office or from the deck or in any combination, and then you discard one card from the hiring office. After your turn is over, you refill the hiring office with cards from the deck. That's going to be the primary way you gather performers into your hand so that you can hire them into your circus. There's one other interactive component to this though. If I take my player marker and I travel to an action that a player is already on, that player earns a popcorn. And this can happen multiple times between turns. So for example, if they're there and I go there, they get a popcorn. If on the next turn then Sally gets her marker and it goes there again, now we both get a popcorn, me and the gorilla. If then the horse comes over and does that, all three of us will get a popcorn. And so there is some strategy when it comes to not going where other places are. The thematic reason for this was that it's not great for multiple circuses to be in town at the same time, and so the circus that got there first should get some kind of reward. This is one of the primary ways, particularly in 3 and 4 player games, that you earn popcorn. So let's say that rest has been triggered by my taking this performance action. A few things happen during the rest period. The first step in the rest period is every player must retire a card from the big top into the sideshow if possible. The only requirements are that the card must be able to live in the sideshow, so no clowns, and you must have an open available slot in your sideshow. Second, you will activate all purple abilities. These are rest abilities. So for example, with roulette, I already activated the blue ability during my performance action. I won't activate that again, but I will activate the purple component here, which means I gain 2 coins each time this card is in my sideshow during rest. I like to think of this as passive income, like emptying the coins from the arcade machines every so often. So you'll activate all purple abilities in your circus, but then you'll also notice that on the reward board, there are purple abilities. This is the renown system. Each rest period, players have the option to make a claim in one of the available renown categories. To do so, they'll spend 8 popcorn, and they must have the popcorn in order to do this, and they'll place a cube on one of the 4 spaces of that category. And players can only ever place a cube on a category one time. There will never be any reason to make a renown claim on the same category twice. What players are essentially doing is buying into that category. And so if I have a renown token that has the strength icon on it, which some cards have, then I'm saying I want to see if my circus has the most strength icons at the end of the game. And at the end of the game, players will score against each other for that particular element. Whoever has the most of that thing will get 10 victory points, and whoever has the second most will get 6. If there's a tie, they'll combine those scores and divide them by 2, so each player would get 8. In a 2-player game, the winner gets 6 and the loser gets 0. Even if they're the only claimant in that category, players must have at least one of the thing to be able to score. After retiring a card and after activating all purple abilities, players will reset the rest marker, discard any face-up cards in the hiring office, and draw 3 new face-up cards from the deck, and all players return all spec tiles, purchased or otherwise, to the general supply, shuffle them, and redistribute them onto the spec board. There's no set number of rest periods that can happen in a game. The obvious trade-off here is the more you use your circus engine through the performance action, the more rest periods happen, the more cards you have to move over into your sideshow. On the other hand, the more opportunities you have to make renown claims. Now is a good time to fill in the rest of the ability types that we haven't talked about. We talked about the red big top ability, which is activated during the 3rd phase of your performance action. We talked about the blue sideshow ability, which is activated in the 4th phase of your performance action. We talked about the yellow ability, which is activated when you hire a card or when you retire a card, and only that time and never again. And we talked about the purple abilities, which are only activated during the rest period. We also mentioned the void symbol. That's not really an ability type, it's more an indicator of where something can live. There are 3 more ability types that activate differently from one another. The green ability, or upgrade ability, is activated conditionally, according to the text on the card. These can do a variety of things. They are usually either passive upgrades or conditional upgrades. So it could be that now you can hold more cards in your hand. The standard is you can hold only 5 cards, but you can increase that, or peanut capacity. They could also trigger when something happens. So for example, when somebody takes a particular action or when somebody hires a particular kind of card, you get something or something happens. And so you have to pay a lot of attention to the text on the card, and it helps to keep track of what you have and what others are doing on the table. The pink ability I like to think of as a consumable. For example, let's say I have the Wunderkammer over in my sideshow. Once it's over in the sideshow, the pink ability becomes active and the red ability deactivates. Once that pink ability is active, at any point on any turn, does not have to be the performance action, I can flip that card face down and take the benefit. In this case, the Wunderkammer says gain 2 approval for each curiosity in your circus, including this one. This is something that I use one time, and then these pink abilities get refreshed at rest. So when we enter the rest period, you'll refresh those cards. Pink abilities are usually very powerful, but their limited number of uses throughout the game because of this exhaust refresh mechanic means that you have to use them kind of strategically, and they often don't feel too powerful. Now, let's say you have a card like Hypnotism, which has 2 pink abilities. Let's say you've already used it and it's face down in your big top. At some point, you take the Circus Manager action, and as part of that turn, you retire the Hypnotist into your sideshow. That refreshes and you are able to use it again. Finally, we have orange abilities. These are scoring abilities only activated at the very end of the game as you're counting your points. So for example, I have my teeter board. If it lives in the sideshow at the end of the game, which would make the bottom ability active, I would gain 2 points for each acrobatics in this row and column. And so it kind of encourages you to think long term about how you set your sideshow up. And those are all the ability types. The final major mechanic in Cirque is what are called feats, and that's on the reward board next to the renown system. At the beginning of the game, you placed 6 feats down onto the reward board, 3 on the gold side and 3 on the silver side. Each of these feat tokens has the same parameter on both the silver and gold side, but a different quantity. And so for example, this one, clowns, on the gold side, you will need 3 clowns to achieve it. On the silver side, you only need 2. So let's say this was placed down on the gold side. At any point during the game, on my turn, if I achieve that feat, if I meet the prerequisite for it, I may take it from the board, and in this case, I would earn 12 victory points. So if I had 3 clowns in my circus, I could grab this. The kicker is that players may only gather 3 feats in any given game. The silver ones are comparatively easier to get, and so you might find yourself meeting those requirements sooner, but maybe you want to hold out for those gold ones. Other players will also be looking to do that, and so you have to be paying attention to what everyone else has and what they seem to be pursuing. Once you gather these, they're yours forever, they cannot be stolen, and you cannot discard a feat you have already taken for a better one. The game ends when a player has completely filled their circus, all 6 slots in the big top, all 9 slots in the sideshow. At the end of that turn, that player will remove their player marker from the board. They will no longer be eligible for popcorn bonuses. They will no longer participate in anything. So if a player has an ability that gives everybody something, they will not get that thing. Everybody else gets 1 more turn. Each time a player takes their final turn, they will remove their player marker from the board and place it next to their player mat. Now, it is possible for rest to be triggered during this last final turn phase. If that happens, only players with markers still on the board will be able to participate, which means only they will have to retire a performer, only they will get to be able to make a renown claim or do any of the other associated actions. Once everybody has taken their final turn, we count the points. The player who ended the game is not necessarily the winner. First, you count performer value by venue. Remember that you're only counting the top number for performers that live in the big top, and you're only counting the bottom number for performers that live in the sideshow. Then you add together the points you earn from feats, the points you earn from renown, you count all of your orange scoring abilities, then all popcorn you earned throughout the game is counted. You get 1 victory point per 2 popcorn. Players add all the points together, and the winner wins. In Cirque, ties are friendly. If you don't like that rule, you can come up with your own tiebreaker. That's everything you need to know to be able to play Cirque. However, there are still ringleaders. Ringleaders change how you play the game. They could give you extra abilities. They could prompt you to do different things during rest periods. And every single ringleader has a very substantial scoring opportunity in the form of an orange power at the bottom of it. By and large, ringleaders influence play by providing the same kinds of abilities that you might find on regular performer cards, but you just have them from the beginning. They're powerful enough that they direct your play, they make the game feel a little bit different, and they might even define some larger objectives for you to pursue throughout the game. The main important thing for you to know outside of a proper ringleader guide where I go through each one by one, which is not this video, is that ringleaders can never contribute anything towards items on the reward board. And so for example, the trainer is an acrobatics card, the zookeeper is a menagerie card, and so on. they do not contribute to those feats. You can't use those tags or these disciplines to earn feats throughout the game. Likewise, some of these, like the marketer has one of each of the tags, the collector has 2 of the allure tags, and so on. Those cannot contribute towards a renown claim at the end of the game. Other than that, they function just as a regular performer card would be, except for, of course, they're a little bit more powerful and they influence gameplay in a very significant way. I will put together a comprehensive ringleader guide in a separate video in the next week or so, but suffice it to say that now that you know the fundamentals of Cirque and you understand how these abilities function in the game generally, playing with ringleaders really is an essential part, for me, of the base experience of Cirque. It's possible to play a game without them. The game works perfectly fine without. I find that they are a much richer experience when players use ringleaders. You've now got everything you need to play Cirque. There are other little details about the game that I'll let you explore on your own, card elements that we didn't really talk about, but they don't contribute really to the concept of the game. They're just things that you might pursue, part of goals, part of these other systems that we've described. There are also going to be a lot of different kinds of card interactions, and so in the back of the rule book, this is not finalized, there won't be all this blank space, is a glossary that details various card interactions. If, as you're playtesting it for yourself, you think you discover something that needs to go in that glossary, please let me know. I think we've covered all of it, but there can be some weird, interesting rule interpretations. I provided official rulings for those in the glossary, and when those are finalized, those will be the law of the land, so to speak. Thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope you're able to get on either screentop.gg or Tabletop Simulator to playtest Cirque for yourself. I thank you also in advance for your support on Gamefound. Building this game has been a real dream for me and for us, and so I really do appreciate your support. I want to make it the best that it can possibly be, and I want as many people to experience this game as possible. I will see you later under the big top.